Alright you guys, a lot of you recently saw my predictions for the next Cedar Fair coasters and were asking for a similar video for Six Flags, so let's give this one a shot as well. Six Flags has 15 parks in North America, which is a few more than Cedar Fair, so we'll take a look at each one and go back 25 years to see if there's any kind of pattern for when these parks can expect a new coaster, also look at the gaps in these parks' lineups, and also see if there's any nearby parks that could affect what each park adds. I'll also take a look at the manufacturers that Six Flags likes to work with currently while making these predictions. So let's get this started. These are the coasters that I think will be coming next to each Six Flags park.
Six Flags! Shut up! Oh my god!
So let's start this off by seeing who Six Flags has been working with lately. One of their favorites seems to be S&S. They obviously have been putting in a lot of 4D free-fly coasters since 2015, and in 2019 they looked to S&S to build an air launch coaster in Max Force. They have also been working with RMC over the last 8 years, and since 2013 the only years that the chain did not add an RMC were 2017 and 2019. Six Flags seems to have an ongoing relationship with Premier Rides. They worked with them to install Full Throttle and West Coast Racers at Six Flags Magic Mountain, and Superman Ultimate Flight at Discovery Kingdom. So what about B&M? You have to go all the way back to 2012 with X-Flight, and the last Intamin the park installed was Green Lantern First Flight in 2011. Another recent manufacturer to keep your eye on is Skyline. They installed Harley Quinn Crazy Coaster, but it's kind of been a disaster. But if Tidal Twister at SeaWorld San Diego turns out to be a success this year, the park may look to Skyline to build that model, although I doubt it will be next year. So let's kick this off with a park that I think will be getting something good in 2020, Six Flags Great Adventure. Now with Cedar Fair, you can usually tell pretty early on if a park is getting a coaster since they'll start land clearing at the beginning of the season for the next year's edition. Six Flags doesn't really do that because they don't place an importance on opening their rides on the park's opening day. The reason I think Great Adventure will get something next year is because they're due. They've had a great run with Medusa, Nitro, Superman, King Ka, and El Toro all within a 7-year span. But in the last 13 years, they've gotten a couple clones and a relocated stand-up. It's about time they get a major thrill coaster. Could it be an RMC TRex? It could be. But I think this park has another gap, and that's a launched looping coaster. This has been a gap ever since they removed the Chiller in 2007. They have King Ka, which accounts for the super intense fast launch coaster, but I think the park could benefit from a longer, loopier, less intense launch layout, so I don't think it'll be like Max Force. I think it'll be more like West Coast Racers. So my official prediction is that for the 2020 season, Great Adventure will return to Premier Rides to build another multi-launch looping coaster. So how about another park that has a good chance at getting a coaster for 2020? Six Flags over Texas. After 2001, they've only gotten 3 coasters, a Pandemonium, the original RMC conversion, and a 4D free spin. This park doesn't have any noticeable gaps. They have an RMC, a Hyper, a launch looping coaster, an invert, and a decent wooden coaster. I think we could be looking at an S&S air launch coaster in 2020. Unlike Mr. Freeze, this will be focused more on the launch than the elements after it, so expect something with an insane rate of acceleration like Max Force. I have this pegged for a 2020 opening, so for the second straight year, I think Six Flags will add a Premier and an S&S launch coaster. So let's head down I-35 to San Antonio for one of Six Flags' favorite parks, Fiesta Texas. Since 2013, they've gotten an RMC conversion, the original 4D free spin, and the RMC Raptor. One major gap this park has is a true wooden coaster. The Rattler was their big wooden coaster until 2012, and I think they could really use a modern wooden coaster. The chain hasn't added a wooden coaster since Goliath in 2014, but I don't think this will be an RMC. I'm betting it'll be a GCI. It's been 10 years since GCI put a coaster into a Six Flags park, but these don't come with a huge price tag, and I have no reason to believe that Six Flags wouldn't contract them in the future. I'm not sure where this would fit, since Fiesta Texas doesn't have a ton of room within the quarry walls, but maybe if they removed their Pandemonium and go-karts, that would leave a nice big area for a GCI that could be entirely within the quarry walls, or they can even use it like a lot of their other rides do. As for a timeline, I'm guessing 2023. Let's go east to Six Flags over Georgia. When you look at their timeline, you can see there are some major gaps here. 5 years between Goliath and Daredevil Dive, and then 7 years until they converted Georgia Cyclone into Twisted Cyclone. I wouldn't be too optimistic that this park will get anything new anytime soon. As for the park's gaps, they haven't had a launch coaster since they removed Viper in 2001. They've also never received an SNS free spin. One other thing this park is lacking is a spinning coaster. I'm going to tie this prediction to my last one and go on a limb and predict that Fiesta Texas will remove their Pandemonium after the 2022 season, and in 2023, that coaster will find a new home at Over Georgia. This park is full of thrill coasters, with the only exceptions being their Mine Train and Joker Funhouse coaster, so this would add another family coaster that the park could use. One of the more depressing Six Flags parks is Six Flags America. And as you can see from the timeline, they were treated very well once they became a Six Flags park after the 1998 season, getting 6 coasters over the span of 4 years. Since 2001, they've gotten 2 relocated coasters from Six Flags Great America, and then for the 2019 season, just the conversion of their stand-up into a floorless. I would be shocked if this park ever got any good ground-up coaster ever again, but that still leaves some decent options. Since this park loves relocated rides, especially from Great America, I would not be surprised to see Vertical Velocity removed at some point and moved down here. But I think there's a more likely scenario that this park's fans will love. One of their coasters got a conversion in 2019, and for 2024, I think that another one of their coasters will get a conversion. They will give the RMC treatment to Roar. Six Flags already pulled the trigger on RMCing Roar at Discovery Kingdom, and with Wild One being a superior Woody in the park, I think this makes all the sense in the world. It would be an inexpensive way to give the park another standout coaster. And based on my rides in 2019, I think this ride is pretty bad, so it's not much of a loss for the park. Up the East Coast is Six Flags New England, and this park has been getting peppered with new coasters over the last 8 years, but they have been cheap options for the chain. A relocated Wild Mouse, a relocated giant inverted boomerang which sits hilariously next to the conventional boomerang, which honestly looks like something you would do in Roller Coaster Tycoon if you needed to add rides but didn't have any money. Their most recent coasters were an RMC conversion and a 4D free spin. Recently, they've been going no more than 3 years between coasters, and 2020 will mark the 3-year mark since they added Joker. I think they'll have to wait a little bit longer for their next coaster, but I think it'll be worth it. The park removed their Aero Shuttle Loop, Black Widow, in 1999 and have not had a launch coaster since. I think Six Flags will look to Premier Rides to build a launched looping coaster for the 2022 season. I wouldn't be surprised if it's a shorter, more compact layout like Full Throttle. And I think this will be more simple and shorter than the premier launch coaster I'm predicting for Great Adventure, maybe featuring some gimmick a lot like Full Throttle. I'm not sure where they could fit this coaster, but it wouldn't take a huge footprint. A little bit north of New England is Great Escape, and this park hasn't gotten a major new coaster in, well, ever. Their last coaster period was a kiddie coaster back in 2005. It could be another 10 plus years until they get anything new or relocated. But for argument's sake, I'm going to say they'll get an SNS free spin for the 2025 season. So while we're talking about sad Six Flags parks, let's go up to Canada for Ronde. This park did get a couple of solid B&Ms in 2003 and 2006 with Vampire and Goliath, but their last coaster was in 2010, and that was a relocated SLC. A lot of people think they should RMC the monster, but apparently RMC can't do business in Canada because they actually like to construct their own rides, and Canada has a law that non-Canadian companies can't do the job if a Canadian company can do it. If this is truly the case, then RMC the monster is off the table. As for what can come to Ronde, this is another park that has SNS 4D free spin written all over it, and I think it could come as soon as 2022. Back in the States, we have the newly branded Six Flags Darien Lake. They had some nice expansion in the late 90s under Six Flags' prior ownership, but since then they just added the Moto Coaster in 2008 and Tantrum last year. Now that the park is back in Six Flags' hands, I think they'll do something good for this park's coaster lineup relatively quickly. And it's hard to think of a coaster that's more prime for the RMC treatment than Predator. This ride is terrible. It doesn't have any real historic value, and it would be an inexpensive way for this park to have another standout coaster right next to their current standout coaster, Ride of Steel. My prediction is that this park will announce Predator's closing sometime during the 2020 season, and we'll see the Iron Horse be open for the 2021 season. So let's go west to Six Flags Great America, one of the favorites of the chain. This park does not have many gaps in its coaster history. They consistently add new coasters every few years. This is a very well-rounded and underrated park. They have a good hyper, 3 solid wooden coasters, good B&M loopers, good family coasters, and good launch coasters. Their newest launch coaster is Max Force, which fills the gap of an intense looping launch coaster. So what could this park add to fill their next gap? This is actually a really tough one. Some people think that they will RMC American Eagle, and I know that was their original plan before RMC offered to build Goliath on the plot of land where Iron Wolf used to be, but it's hard for me to imagine two very similar RMCs there. However, I could see perhaps a different kind of RMC here, the TRex. It probably wouldn't be a 200 or 300 footer given the amount of money Six Flags like to pay for their rides, but I don't think it'll be the single row kind of single rail coaster either since this park gets so much traffic. We could be looking at something in the 150 foot range that focuses on airtime and fast transitions, and this could come in 2022, 3 years after Max Force. Six Flags St. Louis is an interesting park that has 9 coasters, none of which are kiddie coasters or true family coasters. They do have a mine train and a pandemonium which are more family oriented, but still not really geared towards kids. They could go in this direction next, but it's hard to tell when a park might decide to spruce up their kiddie area. Now this park hasn't gotten a real addition in over 10 years. They got American Thunder in 2008, and then they got the relocated Boomerang from Over Texas in 2013. There's been a serious drought here. One obvious coaster that this park is missing is an S&S free spin, but I think they'll go in a different direction. This park does not have a true standout coaster. The Boss is something that really defines the park, and American Thunder is a solid GCI that I believe is by far the best coaster there. But I think they'll get something that'll catapult itself to the top of the park's lineup, and that's an RMC Raptor for the 2021 season. I'm not sure if it'd go with the standard clone model or do something different, but it seems like something St. Louis could easily go with that would be a perfect fit for that park and really put it on the map for people to want to go there. Their current coasters aren't bad, but there hasn't been a reason to go back there since 2008. So let's talk about Frontier City. This is such a little tiny park, and when I went there last year I couldn't envision this being a typical Six Flags park due to its size. This park's standout coaster is a Schwarzkopf Looper, which is kinda sad because the same basic ride also exists at Busch Gardens Tampa and it's an afterthought. I honestly don't even think that Six Flags can do much with this park unless they acquire more land. There are lots of options for this park that don't take up a lot of space and can still be thrilling rides, and I think this park could use a Skyrocket too. Six Flags hasn't installed one of these since 2012 in Superman Ultimate Flight, but given their relationship with Premier Rides, it seems like this makes a lot of sense. They could be getting this as soon as 2021. Six Flags Mexico does not have a whole lot to offer, but they do have some solid additions in recent years. They just got an S&S free spin in 2018, an RMC conversion in 2014, and a relocated Pandemonium in 2013. They also have a nice family dark ride with the Dark Knight and a solid hyper with Superman. This is by no means an ignored park by the Six Flags chain, and because of that, I think they'll get something decent in the near future. After Medusa was RMC'd, it left a gap in their lineup for wooden coasters. I think they could be getting a GCI wooden coaster next, and it could come in 2023. Off to California, let's talk about Six Flags Discovery Kingdom. I think they surprised everybody by adding a 4D free spin just a year after adding Harley Quinn, their Skyline Skywarp. And just 3 years ago, they converted Roar into an RMC hybrid. They seem to be cramming all of these rides into a very small part of the park, and despite the abundance of recent additions, they've all been very small. I think this park is prime territory for an RMC Raptor, but I don't know if they would add one because California's Great America's Railblazer is just an hour away. So here's a bit of an off-the-wall prediction. We've seen quite a few Gravity Group family wooden coasters pop up outside the big chain parks. I think Six Flags will contract them to build one of their small-scale wooden coasters. These are great rides for all ages and would give the park a solid non-inversion based coaster that they're missing. I think the park will take a break from their rapid coaster expansion, so I would expect this in 2024. Alright Magic Mountain, I haven't forgotten about you. So Magic gets coasters pretty regularly. The 4 years between Twisted Colossus and West Coast Racers is actually the longest gap between coasters they've had in at least 30 years. Prior to that, they were working off a 2 to 3 year time frame. This park has some gaps, but given the fact that they're getting a new coaster that's very similar to 2 others in the same park, I don't know if gaps really matter. But here are a few. They're missing a spinning coaster, and these are generally seen as family coasters, and this park is already full of 4 kiddie coasters and 2 other family-oriented coasters in Gold Rusher and Ninja. Plus, the natural fit would be a Gerstlauer spinner, and Six Flags does not work with them anymore, so that would have to be relocated from another park. Since they'll be removing Green Lantern soon, they could go with an S&S free spin, but I doubt that they'll want a coaster similar to the failed Green Lantern. I think that 4 years down the line, the park will be looking at the RMC TRex. I could see them going 200 feet with a tight, intense layout with ejector hills, inversions, and basically a taller, longer version of what we've seen with the current Raptor model. This will be a major addition, so I think it'll come in 2023. You'll notice what's missing from this list. Anything from B&M or Intamin. I'm not convinced that Six Flags will be willing to work with either of them. They're both expensive, and Intamin has a pretty spotty history with Six Flags and Cedar Fair for that matter. You may be wondering about Vekoma also. Their resurgence in Asia is something to keep an eye on, and some of these new models seem to be good for parks looking for Blitz-style launch coasters, but I just don't know if they plan on working with the North American chains. I'll have to see it first to believe it. Over the last decade, we've seen Six Flags work with RMC, SNS, and GCI on multiple occasions, and they provide the types of thrill rides that fall within Six Flags' budget, and I have no reason to think that they'll stray away from that pattern. I have 3 coasters from SNS, 3 from Premier, 5 from RMC, 2 from GCI, and 1 from Gravity Group. As for the timing, for 2020 I have the SNS Air Launch Coaster going to Over Texas, and the Premier Rides Launch Coaster going to Great Adventure. For 2021, I have Frontier City's Skyrocket 2, as well as the 2 RMC projects, Darien Lake's Predator conversion, and St. Louis's Raptor. For 2022, I have LaRonde's Freespin, Great America's TRex, and New England's Premier Launch Coaster. In 2023, I have Mexico's GCI and Magic Mountain's TRex, plus Fiesta Texas's GCI and the removal of Pandemonium, which will go to Over Georgia. In 2024, I have Six Flags America getting RMC Roar and Discovery Kingdom's Family Gravity Group Woody. And finally, in 2025, I have a free spin going to the Great Escape. Keep in mind that by 2023, 2024, and 2025, the parks getting coasters in 2020 and 2021 could be getting another coaster at that point. So that's going to wrap this video up. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I learned a lot from the comments on my Cedar Fair video and actually applied some of those ideas here, so all comments are welcome. And also don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys all next time.